A teenager walks into a courtroom with everything to lose. He's already been convicted of murder. He's already been sentenced to 35 years in prison. But then something crazy happens. The judge who ran his trial gets thrown off the case. Secret deals between lawyers get exposed in open court, and his entire future comes down to a half-page order written by a stranger. This is the crazy ending to the Karmelo Anthony trial, and trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed to this channel? Because this case has more twists than a courtroom drama, and I'm covering every single update as it happens. If you want to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss a single turn in this story. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand the ending, you need to understand how we got here. It was April 2nd, 2025. A rainy spring morning in Frisco, Texas. Over 100 students from 8 schools were at Kuykendall Stadium for a district track meet. The 11-5 a championship. Kids were running, jumping, competing. It was supposed to be a normal day, but the rain changed everything. When the downpour hit, students scrambled for cover, and that's where the trouble started. A 17-year-old named Karmelo Anthony was sitting under a pop-up tent. That tent belonged to Memorial High School. Austin Metcalf was a Memorial student, and he told Anthony to get out. Here's what happened next, according to witnesses. Anthony didn't leave. Instead, he opened his bag, reached inside, and said something that would echo through every headline for the next year. "Touch me, and see what happens." Metcalf pushed him, and then, in a split second, Anthony pulled out a black folding knife and stabbed Metcalf in the chest. The knife was about 5 inches long. The medical examiner would later say it pierced Metcalf's heart. The wound was 2 inches wide. It was not survivable. Austin Metcalf died in the arms of his twin brother, Hunter. Hunter was right there. He saw it happen. He tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too late. A 17-year-old with a 4.0 GPA, the MVP of his football team, a kid with a bright future, gone. In seconds, Anthony ran, but he didn't get far. He was identified quickly, and when police caught up with him, he didn't deny it. In fact, when an officer called him the alleged suspect, Anthony corrected him. "I'm not alleged, I did it." Then he asked if it could be self-defense, and he asked if Metcalf was okay. That's the moment this case was born, because from that day forward, the entire case came down to one question. Was this self-defense? Or was this murder? The news spread fast, and it didn't stay local for long. Social media picked it up, and the case exploded into a national story. Anthony is black, Metcalf was white, and online, the killing was talked about in racial terms. Both families said they became targets of harassment. The prosecutor said there were death threats against the judge. Fake autopsy reports floated around online. People tried to intimidate witnesses. At one point, they had to sneak Anthony into the courthouse because they were so worried about his safety. The lawyers on both sides said they were worried about their own lives. That's the atmosphere this case was born into, and that matters, because it explains everything that happened next. Let me break down what each side argued, because this is where the story gets complicated. The defense said Anthony was scared. They said Metcalf was bigger than him. They said he was surrounded by bigger kids, and they said Metcalf had no legal right to use force to kick Anthony out of that tent. In their view, Anthony was defending himself. He was protecting himself from boys who were bigger and stronger. He told police that Metcalf put his hands on me. He said he acted to protect himself. The prosecution told a very different story. They said Anthony was the aggressor. They said he provoked the fight. They pointed to the fact that he reached into his bag and threatened Metcalf before anything physical happened. "Touch me and see what happens." That's not the words of a scared kid. That's a challenge. The prosecutor, Bill Werskey, called it a senseless murder. He told the jury this was not self-defense. It was plain and simple murder. The trial started in June of 2026. It took place in Collin County, Texas. The judge was Judge Roach. And for weeks, the courtroom heard testimony from students who were there that day. Witness after witness described the confrontation. Witness after witness said Anthony did it. And witness after witness said it wasn't self-defense. Inside the courtroom, both sides told the jury the same thing. This case had nothing to do with race. But outside the courtroom, the whole world was watching. Every move was scrutinized. Every decision was second-guessed, and that pressure shaped the decisions that came later. Then came the defense's last hope, a legal argument called sudden passion. Now, sudden passion is a Texas legal concept. Here's how it works in simple terms. If a person kills someone in the heat of the moment in a state of intense emotion without time to think, it can reduce the punishment instead of a murder sentence. The range drops to 20 years. The defense argued that Anthony acted in a sudden burst of fear and chaos. They said it was a split-second decision. No time for cool reflection. The jury didn't buy it. After about 3 hours of deliberation, they came back with a verdict: guilty, guilty of murder, a first-degree felony in Texas. But the punishment phase wasn't done. The same jury had to decide the sentence, and they had to decide whether to accept the sudden passion argument. They rejected it. After more hours of deliberation, they came back with a number: 35 years in prison. Here's the part that's easy to miss in Texas. Anthony won't be eligible for parole until he serves half of that sentence. That's 17.5 years. He was 19 years old when he was sentenced. That means he won't even be considered for release until he's in his mid-30s. And that's if everything goes perfectly. There's one more detail from the arrest that sticks with me. On the police body camera video, Anthony can be heard crying as an officer walks him to the car. He says, "I told him not to put his hands on me." That's the moment you see the fear the defense kept talking about. But the jury heard the whole story, and they still said guilty. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video. I'm breaking down the self-defense laws in Texas and how they actually work in real courtrooms. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Now here's where the story takes its first crazy turn, because the conviction wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Anthony's original defense team stepped aside. A new team came in, and their leader was an appellate lawyer named Russell Wilson. Wilson didn't just accept the verdict. He went looking for problems, and he found them. The new team filed a motion for a new trial. Now, in most cases, that motion is a formality. It's almost automatic. Defense lawyers file it to preserve issues for appeal. Most of the time, it gets denied quietly. But this case was different, because the issues Wilson raised were not small. First, there was the courtroom access issue. The defense claimed that during the trial, the judge limited public access to the proceedings. They said an overflow room was shut down. They argued this violated Anthony's Sixth Amendment right to a public trial. That's a big deal. The Sixth Amendment guarantees that criminal trials are open to the public. If that right is violated, it can be grounds for a new trial. Second, there was the issue of the judge himself, Judge John Roach. After the verdict, Roach gave a TV interview. In that interview, he said the jury got it right. He defended his courtroom restrictions, and he released a public letter thanking everyone who worked on the case. The defense said that was a problem. They argued that a judge who publicly endorses a guilty verdict can't be impartial in post-trial proceedings, so they asked to have him removed. And here's the crazy part: it worked. A hearing was held on August 19th. A judge named Sid Harrell heard the recusal motion, and he ruled that Roach should be removed from the case. He said there were grounds for recusal. He said the evidence showed that Roach's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. So the judge who ran the entire murder trial was thrown off the case. That almost never happens, and it set the stage for something even bigger. Here's what's wild about this. The recusal hearing itself was a preview of the fight to come. The defense pointed to Roach's TV interview. They pointed to his public letter. They argued that a judge who's already decided the case can't be trusted to handle the aftermath, and Judge Harrell agreed. He didn't just deny the motion. He removed Roach from everything related to the case. That's a strong ruling. It told the defense they had a real shot. With Roach gone, a new judge was assigned. His name was Michael Chitty. He was a retired district judge from Kaufman County, and his job was to decide whether Anthony deserved a new trial. That's when things got really interesting. Because the hearing he oversaw exposed secrets that had been hidden for months. Hey, most of the people watching right now aren't subscribed yet. Don't be part of that group. Join the viewers who follow this case closely and get every update first. Click subscribe. It takes 2 seconds and it's free. So what was the secret? It was something called a gentleman's agreement, and it's the heart of this whole story. Here's what happened before the trial. The prosecution and the defense made a deal. It was informal, it was off the record, and it was designed to keep certain evidence away from the jury. The prosecutor, Bill Wersky, explained it this way. Both sides agreed to stay away from historical character. They agreed to stick to the facts of what happened under the tent. Why? Because this case was explosive. It was racially charged. Both sides were getting death threats. The lawyers said they were worried about their lives, so they made a deal to keep the temperature down. But here's what that deal hid, and this is the part that shocked me when I found out about it. On Anthony's side, the jury never heard about his documented interest in guns and knives. They never heard that he had sent a text fantasizing about stabbing someone. They never heard that he was angry on the morning of the track meet. They never heard about allegations that he stalked and threatened his girlfriend. The prosecutor said Anthony went to that meet spoiling for a fight. The jury never heard any of that. On Metcalf's side, the jury never heard about his history of fighting. They never heard allegations that he had bullied black classmates. They never heard that he had used racist language in the past. The defense had that evidence, and they agreed not to use it. Both sides gave up ammunition. Both sides kept secrets, and both sides told the jury that race had nothing to do with this case. That was the agreement. But here's where the agreement broke down, and this is the moment that could change everything. According to Anthony's trial attorney, Mike Howard, the biggest dispute came when Anthony was preparing to testify. Anthony wanted to take the stand. He wanted to tell his side of the story, but there was a problem. The prosecution took the position that the gentleman's agreement did not cover Anthony if he testified. In other words, if Anthony got on the stand, the prosecution could bring up all that character evidence, his interest in guns and knives, his violent texts, his anger that morning. Howard said there was a heated exchange in the judge's chambers, and here's the result. Anthony decided not to testify. He didn't take the stand in his own murder trial. Why? Because he felt he wasn't going to get a fair shake. His new lawyers argued that this was coercion. They said Anthony was essentially forced to give up his right to testify, and they said that denied him a complete defense. There's one more thing that came out in that hearing. Anthony's girlfriend was in the courtroom, and under the agreement, the jury never heard about allegations that Anthony had stalked and threatened her. That evidence existed. The prosecutor had it, but he agreed not to use it. Think about how different the trial could have looked if the jury had heard that. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Because what happened in this hearing shows how complicated real trials can be. Let me give you a hypothetical example to explain why this matters. Imagine you're on trial. You have the right to tell your story, but your lawyer tells you that if you talk, the other side gets to bring up things you did years ago, things that have nothing to do with the case. Would you still testify? Most people would say no, and that's exactly what happened here. The defense says Anthony's silence wasn't a choice. It was the only option he had left. The hearing on the new trial motion lasted 2 days. It was intense. Lawyers from the original trial took the stand. The prosecutor took the stand. The defense attorneys took the stand. They went back and forth about what was agreed, about what was said in the judge's chambers, about whether Anthony was pressured into silence, about whether the courtroom was really closed to the public. The prosecution argued that Anthony got a fair trial. They said the original defense attorneys agreed to everything. They said the agreement was held. They said witness after witness came in and told the same story. Anthony did it. It wasn't self-defense. The prosecutor said the deal was made to keep the peace. He said the lawyers on both sides were worried about their lives. The defense argued the opposite. They said the trial was marred by errors. They said the shadow docket hid character information from both sides. They said everything was done off the record at an astonishing clip, and they said Anthony's rights were violated. Then everyone waited. Judge Chitty said he needed to review all the documents. He had until Monday to rule, and the families sat in the gallery. Austin Metcalf's father, Jeff, was there. He told reporters that if Anthony got a new trial, he could face even more years. The tension was unbearable. This information could change at any moment. Subscribe now because the next video explains exactly what happens next in this case. And what the appeal could mean for Anthony's future. You do not want to find out about that one after the fact. And then, on Saturday, August 22, 2026, it came, the decision. Judge Michael Chitty denied the motion for a new trial, and here's the thing, it wasn't a long ruling, it wasn't a detailed explanation, it was a brief order, half a page. He wrote that he reviewed the motion, the record, the evidence, the argument, the briefs, and the relevant case law, and he determined the motion should be denied. That's it, that's the crazy ending, a half-page order. And just like that, Anthony's murder conviction stands. His 35-year sentence stands, and he goes back to serving his time. But wait, there's something even more important, because this is not the end of the story, not even close. Anthony's legal team released a statement. They said they were disappointed but not deterred. They said serious constitutional and legal errors denied Anthony a fair trial. They pointed to the courtroom access restrictions. They pointed to the agreement with the state, and they said the denial doesn't end their work. They're taking the case to the 5th Court of Appeals in Dallas. The district attorney, Greg Willis, also released a statement. He said they respected and expected the court's decision. He said the jury's guilty verdict stands, and he said his thoughts and prayers remain with the Metcalf family. So what happens now? Here's the honest answer. The appeal could take a long time. One appellate attorney not involved in the case said the appeal could come together quickly, but because of the length of the process, an appeals hearing might not happen until 2027. That's a year away, maybe more. Here's how the appeal works in simple terms. The defense will file written arguments with the 5th Court of Appeals. The state will file its response. Then the court will decide. Whether to hear oral arguments, that process takes time, and during all of it, Anthony stays in prison. He doesn't get out while the appeal runs. Unless a court says otherwise, he serves his time while his lawyers fight. And here's what the appeal will focus on: the same issues from the new trial motion, the gentleman's agreement, the courtroom access, the decision not to testify. Plus, there's another issue that was raised right after the verdict. The defense argued that black jurors were improperly removed from the jury panel. There were no black members on the jury. That's a legal issue called a Batson challenge, and it could be a major part of the appeal. So, here's the bottom line. The crazy ending to the Karmelo Anthony trial wasn't a twist in the courtroom. It was everything that happened after the verdict. A judge removed from his own case, secret agreements exposed, a new trial demanded. And then, in the end, a half-page order that said no, Anthony is now 19 years old, sitting in a Texas prison, serving 35 years for murder. He won't be eligible for parole for 17.5 years. His lawyers say they'll fight all the way to the appellate courts, and the Metcalf family is left with a hole that no ruling can fill. This case is not over. It's just moving to a new courtroom. And the next chapter could take years to write. Look, I spend hours digging through court records and news reports so you don't have to. The least you can do is hit that subscribe button and join the community. Because when this case moves again, and it will move again, you'll want to hear it here first. Deal? And one last thing. This video is for education and information only. It's not legal advice. If you ever find yourself facing a legal situation, talk to a lawyer in your state. Don't rely on a video on the internet. Austin Metcalf was 17 years old. He had a 4.0 GPA. He was the MVP of his football team, and he died in his twin brother's arms at a high school track meet. That's the part of this story that never changes. No matter how many twists and turns the legal system takes.